Everybody, good evening, and welcome to tonight's webinar. We're going to wait a minute. People have to filter into the webinar, and then we'll jump in. We have an hour tonight, and I'm happy you're all here. We can talk about what's going on, what we know so far when it comes to the new computer adaptive SAT that's going to be arriving in pretty short time, 13 months internationally, and a little over in a couple of years here in the US. But tonight we're going to just have a format of some basic slides. I'm going to cover just some of the fundamentals, and then we're going to go into open Q&A. Hopefully we'll have lots of good questions. Know that we are recording this, and we'll be sharing a copy with you. Happy to share the deck and happy to share the recording. And then we'll probably be doing this talk a few more times. Got a sense there's a lot of interest in this conversation. So I'm going to jump on in, and again, I'm going to have an open Q&A at the end. So if you could, if you want to answer your questions in the short term, it's totally fine in the Q&A, but I'll be answering them at the end in a big Q&A section. So, all right, 8:01. Let me jump in. So to begin, the big news. We learned in late January that we are going to be having a completely new digital SAT, a computer adaptive SAT, starting, for the current freshman. So if you are a current junior, this is not going to affect you. If you are a current sophomore, again, it's not going to affect you. If you are a current freshman, this is going to affect you. So just be mindful of where things are. That's an important detail to bring about. The big details, the kind of the top level announcements, that we're dropping down from a roughly 3-hour test to a roughly 2-hour test. We're shaving off nearly an hour of content. That's a big deal. That students who struggle with, the cognitive endurance of a full SAT experience, now it's going to get shorter for them. So that's brilliant. Additionally, we're going to be reducing the amount of time you have per question. I'm sorry, we're going to be increasing the amount of time you have per question and reducing the focus on processing speed. And so that's also a big deal. They're going to be giving you, so within a given section, you have more time per question. So it's less about speed. So less about cognitive endurance, less about speed. All these things so far are great for students. One profound change, and I think a real deviation from their previous course, the SAT, when it was redesigned in 2016, they were focusing a lot on long form reading passages. And they were pulling in, like, you can get a passage from Emily Bronte or something, a long form science passage with many questions. And they are leaving that behind. The new model, which actually is very nice and relatively easy for working on a tablet or on a laptop, is going to be short passages. We're talking one paragraph, one question, next. One new paragraph, one question. You're not going to have 90 lines of text going back and forth to answer 10 questions. So that's actually really beneficial. You're going to have to, focus less on working memory and being able to recall, did I read that in paragraph 2 or 4 or 3? It's all just right here. That's going to eliminate certain kinds of questions that we've seen over the years on the SAT in terms of the way, how does the author, pivot or change strategy or things like that. But they're going to be able to ask the vast majority of questions. What kind of evidence does an author use? This word in this sentence most likely means. The author implies that, we'll be able to ask plenty of questions, but not the paragraph, like in the context of the passage kind of questions. So they also are going to offer a wider range of topics, with these little single one-hitters. We're not going to have the basic just historical fiction or prose fiction or science. We're going to have a wide variety of things. They're just one-hitters. Part of the reason we're doing that is it's going to be a lot easier to generate a lot of content with just one paragraph, 10 sentences, and then a question. Additionally, they're going to be able to use eventually machine learning, where they're going to feed in many passages, and they'll actually be able to generate new copy, new text. That's a big thing that they're working on for over 5 years over at the ACT. So this will make that a lot easier too. In terms of a calculator, it's going to be embedded in every math section. They're using a very nice calculator that's full function. It can do everything that your TI can. And that's going to be baked in. So if you still want to bring your TI, you can. Otherwise, it's just part of the test. Additionally, the testing scoring is not changing. 800 apiece, same percentiles. 750 means the same thing on this test as it will in 2 years. So beyond this, they're internationally, they're adding 2 testing dates, which shouldn't affect my kids here in the US, but that'll bring it up to 7 apiece. They're also going to be giving kids information about other programs, other careers besides just college at the end of it. And one of the major changes is we're going to have a lot of flexibility with scheduling. That historically, the way it's worked is, when you have fixed testing forms, like testing, 45H, the issue is once we expose that form, it's essentially, it's going to be out there, and they're very careful that if you're, giving a test in a school, if I give this test form out on a Wednesday, then I can't typically have kids giving it the same test on a Thursday because people talk in the hall and, oh yeah, this question was really hard. But what's going to happen here is we have computer adaptive testing. And every single time a kid takes a test, it's going to be a different test. And they're going to be hundreds and hundreds of sections that are going to be adaptive. We'll talk about that in a little bit, what that means to you guys. But it just means that schools are going to be able to offer these tests, to a third of their sophomores on Monday, a third on Tuesday, a third Wednesday. It's a much shorter test. So they could start at, 8:30 and be done with testing by 11 and then on to your regular classes. So if they only have a certain number of laptops or Chromebooks, they're going to be able to be flexible with that. And the kids are going to have different tests. So whatever the kids, if they see it and talk about it Monday's test, it'll be different than Wednesday's test. So cheating is going to be dramatically reduced. That's actually one of the huge drivers of this change. For a long, long time, there was a problem of item exposure. When test forms were fixed, test forms were able to get out and they get leaked. And there were so many tests that were canceled overseas for the whole countries. They canceled all the tests in South Korea or in Hong Kong, in Egypt, and other, in China. It was really very challenging because all it takes is one bad actor to grab a test, pull out of the pile, take some pictures, put it back in the pile, and then share them. And then you've compromised, with the internet, anyone in the country who has access to they can find these answers if people are sharing them and paying for them. So fixed test forms are a liability. Digital test forms, it really solves for that. It's really a tremendous advantage in test security, night and day. So papers, honestly, it's been going on the way out for a long time. The first, computer adaptive test was the GMAT and GRE. That was 1997. Then the MCAT, the GRE changed again in 2011. The TOEFL, the LSAT. It's about time. It's actually kind of past time. And it was all these cheating scandals overseas that forced the change to computer-based testing for the ACT back in 2018 for other international students. And now the College Board is finally catching up, and they're actually going ahead with this computer section adaptive testing. So there are many questions about what this adaptive engine means. What does that mean? And so the idea is this. The very first section, they're going to break up the tests into verbal, will be two sections, and math, 2 sections. And to our best of our knowledge, that's where things are going. It'll be a 4-section test, pretty basic. The same as, with a GRE, although they actually have some experimental sections thrown in into pretest questions. And we don't know yet if the College Board ever intends to use experimental sections to make sure the tests are the right level of difficulty. They're good questions. There's no bias in the questions. But right now, students will get a baseline, a generic, neutral first section for math, and then the first section for verbal. And now they're combining critical reading and the writing and the grammar. That's all. Just it'll rotate. And so the way this is the same exact model that we see on the GRE, where the GRE is the exact same thing. There's a baseline score, and the baseline, let's say for our purposes, we're assuming the midpoint here. Right now, the midpoint on the SAT is a 540. And so if the midpoint is here, they're going to give you questions, a full range of questions for the first section. Is called half an hour roughly. And they're going to give you questions that are very, very easy and questions that are very, very hard. We do not know yet if they're going to go in increasing difficulty order, or like the GRE, if they're going to randomize difficulty levels. And so you could get an easy one, a hard one, easy one, a hard one. We do know that this is not like the GMAT, where the questions increase in difficulty order and the first 4 or 5 questions matter a lot. And if you do poorly on the first 5, then it starts to set you, it assumes you're getting a 500. If you miss 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in a row, it assumes you're getting a 350 and begins giving you appropriate questions. That's not what this is. This is a section adaptive question. So the whole section is static, unchanging. I can go back and forth in the section, answer all my questions. And until I press submit for that section, I'm not getting a score. I'm not being bracketed. I'm not going to, so I can go back and forth. And if I'm nervous in the first few questions, you can calm down, go back, and you can flag questions, review them. It's your section. And based on how you do, and if it's the GRE model, every question is weighted the same. So the easy questions, they add 1 raw point. The hard questions add run. It's not like the easy ones are weighted less than the hard ones in this section. Then they give you a raw score. And based on the raw score at the end, you are going to get bracketed. And then they're going to place you into an easier form, a middle level form, or a harder form. We're assuming we're going to have 3 typical buckets for students. They could be more granular. There could be 6 buckets or 8 buckets, depending upon how you score. The assumption is we'll have an easier, a middle, and a hard. What that means is if let's say there are 20 questions on this introductory math section, and you have more time per question, let's say it's 1.5 minutes per question. Let's say you only get 8 of them right. So you've missed 12 questions. The assumption is that the really hard questions are not going to be for you. You're going towards a lower score. So they're going to put you towards questions that are more targeted towards your level. And the next level of questions for section 2 are going to figure out, are you at a 200 or a 250, a 300, a 400? But there's a cap. You're not going to be able to score higher than a certain threshold because 1, you already missed 12 questions, and they're not going to be giving you the hardest questions possible based on performance in the first one. That's the low level. And conversely, if from the first 20 questions, you get 18 of them right, wow, they think, okay, this kid's going to be somewhere in these 700s or so. They're going to give you a harder section. They're not going to give you the very, very basic algebra. They won't give you 2, plus 3 raised to the 3rd power because you're well beyond that. They're going to be throwing at you harder content, harder algebra, some trigonometry, things like that. And so in this range, they're trying to figure out, am I going to be getting for a 550 or a 6 or an 800? But I've already earned a place with my 18 right that I'm not going to be getting under that 550. I've already earned a place. And also I'm not going to see those easier questions. So that is the way this is adaptive, as we understand it. So everyone has a baseline section for math, and then you have a bracketed, calibrated section for math. Same thing for verbal. They're going to throw at you, a range of verbal questions and grammar and so forth. If you do really, really well, then they're going to throw at you the harder content, the harder passages, the harder material. But if you do very poorly, then you're going to be bracketed toward a lower level assessment. And it makes sense. So kids who, are struggling on the first thing aren't just disheartened with really hard material. Things will feel easier. But if things start feeling harder, well, that actually means you did well in the first section. And you always want that harder second section. That means you're actually tracking for a better score. Even though it'll definitely feel different because the first one is pretty open, they'll be easy and hard to swing. But then the next one, now it's harder because they're trying to figure out 770, 680. Where are we? You're definitely at a higher range. And the reason they can be so much more efficient is by eliminating all those easier questions, they're able to get to your score faster. So in a math section, they may be able to tease out, are you a 690 or a 710 or a 330 with 35 questions, whereas the current test, you need closer to 60 questions because that's the beauty of an adaptive test. It's more efficient, gets you there faster. It's also highly reliable. So that's it. One downside potentially is when it comes to test release for many, many years, after the Truth in Testing Act in New York, they passed legislation, the College Board and the HT both had to release test forms 3 times a year. But there aren't any more fixed test forms. No 2 kids are going to have the same test. And also, when I say you're going to be getting a hard section, the College Board, ETS, may generate 500 hard sections on math. So it's not like you're getting the exact same one. And even, you're over here, your friend's over here, you may have very different baseline sections and also very different bracketed, hard, medium, easy sections. And they're going to probably generate hundreds to eliminate the problem of testing and cheating. And so that's why they can, administer them 3 times in a row in the same school and not worry that the answers leak out because, okay, that's answers for one student, but they'll be very different for another student. And they're going to make a massive, massive section bank. So that'll solve for cheating. So what are they going to release? They're not going to release these items because they're going to stay in play for a long time. What they may do is just release a bunch of official questions, but they're not going to give you a full test form anymore. Because also, scoring it's impossible to score it the same way because it's an adaptive scoring module. All right, so the one key difference is that your early section, it does count more. That if you go in there and have a horrible first section, you're capped. Like there's no way to get past if you miss. And the same thing, like for the ACT, there's only one math section. So if you go in there and tank it, well, that's your math score. And so in the same case here, you can't go in there and tank the first one, but no, you can't currently. So that's part of it. Now let's move on to part of the question is, why they're doing this. Well, I mentioned before, test security. That paper is inherently insecure. There's a reason that everyone's moving away from paper forever. I live in Georgia. We have the Georgia Milestones. It's now computer-based. In New York, they have the Regents. It's computer-based. In California, the Smart Balance, computer-based. The DAT, the MCAT, the LSAT, the TOEFL, it's all computer-based. GRE, GMAT. Paper is just archaic and it's tied to old technologies and it's inherently insecure. We know that there's going to be a reliability. We also know that proctors over the past 20 years of doing this, I've heard of so many stories where proctors mess things up with timing, with breaks, with calling things out, whatever it is. Also, the grids go away. No more problems with bubbling or circling or getting off grid. And then it's much easier for schools to schedule these and have them whenever they want. Before they had fixed windows, we can offer this test form in this window like one time, but now they can offer it 15 times if they want. And we're going to see a lot more school day testing. That's part of this. It's going to be shorter. It's going to be easier. It's going to be flexible. Schools can put it whenever they want, February 5th, January 8th, or whatever makes sense for the school. And again, if they want to use their technology, they can break it up. This class will take it on Tuesday, this one Wednesday, and we're not worried about exposure. That's a huge deal. Accommodations are going to be easier in every way when it comes to a computer. I'm able to change the font size. I'm able to change the screen, the color and contrast. For students who have problems with reading, they're going to have text to speech. I'll be able to replay it a bunch of times and change the speed of it. If I need extra breaks, they're going to enter a code and they build it in. If I need time and a half, enter a code, they build it right in. And so it tells me my timing, and I'm going to watch my timing. It'll always be right there to eliminate proctor error. They're shorter. It's just more time per question. In every single way, this test is better. And then some kids may need a paper accommodation if they have like problems with visual acuity, they can't read a screen. But otherwise, though, they're forcing the whole country over to this change in March of 2024. So that's going to be for current freshmen. That'll be their first full test, and then paper is just gone. Additionally, they're going to do a trial run of this in October for the PSAT in 2023. So current freshmen, when you are juniors, that PSAT is going to be computer adaptive also. All right. There's a question about kids at home. Are they going to be able to have these tests at home? The answer is no. This isn't like the APs during COVID. You're going to have them at school or at dedicated testing centers. And we still don't know to the extent to which they're going to leverage the current infrastructure for testing. Because right now, all over the country, they have several thousand of these test centers. I went and took the GRE years ago, and I went in on a Wednesday morning, and I chose my time, and I signed up, gave my stuff, my card, my license. And I sat down. I'm taking the GRE. This person over here is taking the GMAT. This person over here is taking the TOEFL, and there's a whole bed of computers. And we don't know yet if the College Board will let students go in there on a given day of their choice and just take it, which would solve for homeschoolers and be quite lovely. Because also we have some concerns about availability for testing. We know that since the pandemic, there's been more of an insular, like a kind of a self-ish focus at schools who used to be open. They'd have a national test on Saturday and they'd have some seats for their kids, but it'll be open registration. Now what they're doing is they're having closed tests, and especially more school day testing. And so that means that all their kids are having a test twice a year internally for the school, but they're not opening themselves up to the whole community. And there's also a question of, will they do that with their own technology, with their Chromebooks or their tablets? Are they going to let other kids use those? Or is, the College Board said they're going to fill in the gap, but we just don't know if we're going to see a decrease in availability for the national testing and for homeschoolers. That's still, and one of the answers will be to let them use these dedicated centers because you already have, tests and technology already there. So in terms of the reliability issue, and there were some issues like with the ACT, it's been digital since 2018 internationally. And we work with people all over the country and all over the world. We have IECs in Europe and Africa and Asia. One of our colleagues in Jakarta said that her students went in there and there were problems with the grid, or there were problems with the network. And then they had, tests crash, and kids were 2/3 in and their data was wiped. That's really, really frustrating for kids. Additionally, there was an issue in 2020, back in May, when they had the first ever at-home APs. And for the 3 million kids taking it, about 30,000, roughly 1%, had problems with uploading their information. They tried to upload it and it crashed, and it was lost. So they had to go take it again in a couple of weeks. And so that's going to be solved. The way they're solving it is they're making it a hardware fix. They are going to have, they're going to, enter a code, which boom, unlocks the test on either your device or the school's device. And then there it is. And then as you're entering keystrokes, it's saving every single keystroke with timestamps. The same as like a Google document for a Google document. Any changes you make, it's saving everything you enter. So if I'm on question 19, and then I have 3 minutes left, and my computer dies, it is saved onto the hard drive. It's auto-saving everything constantly. You're not tied to the network. The network can crash, and even you aren't tied to the power, because ideally you go in there with a charged up Chromebook or laptop. And so the power doesn't matter, and then also the network. Once everything is then ready to go, you take, the Chromebook, the laptop, your MacBook, they're going to go and then plug it back in, and it's going to upload everything. So even, during the test, you're not relying upon any kind of power or any kind of internet. It's only when it's finished, and then you go to upload it, a completed test. And so there is a question of, will all the schools have enough of these? My answer to that one is I live in a state here in Georgia where we have the Georgia milestone test. And they administer this test to every single student in all the counties, the most poor counties, the most rural counties, the ones who, would they have enough tests? And the answer is yes. And part of it is they contract out with vendors, and some of them come with a bed of 200 Chromebooks or 300 tablets, and they're in and they bring them. They're all serviced up, they're charged up, they deliver them, they assess the kids, off they go again. And that may be a thing that we're going to see. And the College Board mentioned they're going to be intervening with loaners, whether they do a deal with Alphabet for Chromebooks, or Apple for a bunch of Macs, or for tablets, or, whatever it is, they're going to find a way to address that. And the fact that we're getting it, every kid in Georgia is taking a test on a computer, and New York and California, I think they're going to be able to solve this nationally. It's more interesting internationally, but they're talking about mailing kids or mailing schools Chromebooks or things, which sounds kind of weird, but we'll see how that plays out. But ultimately, technology, I think it's going to work. I don't know if there's going to be a real advantage for if I'm using my own computer, because all you're doing is pressing A, B, C, or D, enter, forward, and a few keystrokes for the student response questions. But there's not much writing or back and forth interaction. It's pretty basic. So my sense is you do the exact same on the school provided Chromebook or your home laptop, whatever you're using. It shouldn't really make a difference. So we're going to have more details eventually about the tech interface. But it seems like they've really solved for the reliability issues here, and it saves to the hardware. And we're not going to have the problems we've had previously for the ACT. Okay. Timeline. So internationally, starting in March of next year, everyone internationally is going to be taking this test. The same as, the ACT, they used international kids as guinea pigs. So too will the College Board, because if they make any mistakes there, much easier to screw up internationally than domestically with your home market. We also know, though, that timelines haven't always been adhered to. The redesigned SAT was delayed from 2015 to 16, a full calendar year. The computer-based ACT was delayed a full calendar year from 2017 to 18. So delays seem pretty common in this space. We know that the PSAT 8 and 9, and the PSAT 8 and 9 actually has already been available on a computer-based, not adaptive, but computer for over a year. So the PSAT and MSQT for juniors, and the PSAT 8 and 9 for 8 and 9 graders is going to go live in October of 2023. And then the US paper is, per the current schedule, paper is gone forever at March of 2024. So that'll be the last. So anyone who's a freshman, you will be taking a computer-based test. Some will take this test early when they're juniors, if they're currently freshmen. And they'll have a paper score, and they'll have a computer score, and they're going to be interchangeable. And the content is going to be so similar anyhow. It's going to be shorter, but very, very similar content. And then the PSAT, they're doing the adaptive version of that the following spring. So I don't know exactly why they're doing that, but that's one of their strange anomalies there. All right, so things that, again, this is only going to affect freshmen. Juniors, sophomores, not for you. Although you might see some surprises coming from the ACT. That's a big question. In terms of the current platform, the ACT, they're using a platform called Tau, but the College Board is going to be using their own platform. They use part of that when they administer the AP exams, but it's going to be something very different. And now, when students download the app, they're going to be able to practice and play. The Khan Academy is going to release practice tests by the fall. So at the latest, we're going to have full-scale practice tests by November. And that's because internationally, kids are taking these things in the following March. We know there's going to be a break between sections, probably a very short one between and then, at section after 2, we'll have a little longer break. There'll be a timer, multiple choice questions. All right, let me go forward. In terms of some of the tools I mentioned at the very top, there'll be a little timer telling you how much time is remaining. They can hide it. They can ask for an alert if they want. Calculators, it's going to be built in. It's a strong one. It's full function. It's very helpful. If you want to bring your own, you can, but you don't need to anymore. And then the math questions, you're going to have the references up there, and you press a button, and there's the formulas for triangles and circula, circumference equals, area equals. There's no memorizing those. They're embedded in the software. Additionally, you're going to be able to flag. So of the 20 questions or so, I'm struggling with number 4. I'm going to flag it. Number 9, number 13. So I can go back and forth between them when I flag them. That's pretty handy. So if I have time at the end, I can go back and review ones that were hard for me. There is a little help section, and they can also raise their hand physically and say I'm having a hard time with whatever reason. When it comes to the ACT, they've been administering a computer-based test internationally for the past 3 years. So they know how to do this. And initially, they announced 2017, they were going to be rolling out a computer adaptive test. They haven't done that yet. They were going to phase it first computer-based, which is just imitating fixed forms. And it is somewhat more secure because now you don't have a stack of tests waiting. This is all form 35H. They're going to have all the forms available, and on test day, they can push one out to you, whether it's form 35C or 27H, and you don't know. So it makes it harder to get to go in and cheat. The problem is, though, if you have had access to those test forms, and a student can memorize 40 tests, put them in a room for a month. And so that's one issue versus when you have this enormous bank of problems and hundreds of sections, that's when you crack human memory and you just can't hold them all. So that's where we solve for cheating once and for all, which is great. It's really a huge thing. But we don't know yet. Janet Godwin, the current CEO of the ACT, said, when it comes to the pandemic, the name of the game is just getting the kids through these, getting them all to access to the testing. And they delayed all of their big initiatives. They were going to release sectional testing in the US in 2020 and computer-based testing, but it wasn't adaptive. This move by the College Board will force them to respond. And I'd be amazed if there is not going to be an option to take a computer-based test next year for kids. This calendar year, this academic year, no. But next year, I'd be very surprised if there's not either a regional pilot or a national pilot, because again, was scheduled for 2 years ago. They just put it on pause. And they're ready. They've been working on this for 8 years. So the ACT is actually really farther ahead with this. All right. And in terms of concordance tables, honestly, that's not really a problem. I'm going to skip that slide. Essentially, what they're saying is that, like the GRE, it generates a score, the GMAT, and they don't tease out the full algorithm. It's going to vary by the weighting, and they're going to do some equating to modify differences in difficulty levels. So a student who gets 15 right on the easy second section versus 15 right in the hard, they're going to have different scores, and they're going to equate them and use their models. But essentially, they're going to be comparing score to score. The way they made this most recent concordance table is they're going to have kids who took both the SAT and the ACT, and they'll compare the ranges and genetic concordance. And that's what they did for the NCAA in the past couple of years. Okay, so things we don't know, is that going to drive more kids toward the ACT in a couple of years, or will they too be going adaptive? My sense is from the ACT, from their planning, that they announced it was going to be optional. So they weren't forcing the choice on students. They had the possibility of doing a computer-based test or paper test. So we still don't know if they're going to offer that or eventually force them. Over time, everyone's going to have to be adaptive because paper is problematic, but they may have a lag or a window when kids are making that transition. This may push some of the class of 2025 to get testing done earlier. That happens quite a bit. And then, we don't know how often kids can retest. If they're going to offer it at these digital testing centers, like the GRE, I can go in there once a month and take it every month versus the current 7 times per year. So we'll find out. And obviously that's inefficient and expensive and wasteful, but it could be, you can take it whenever it makes sense for you. It could be even like during a school day. If your school's off, you go on a Wednesday and take it. So we don't know the full details just yet. That'll be coming over time. Let me look at my time here. So that is the deck. And we have time for questions. And I could answer a lot more questions about this, but let me pull up my Q&A window. And so actually, you know what? Why don't you start loading it up? Because I have questions from earlier. I've been having discussions with counselors across the country, and I have some of them saved up if you want more questions. But let me go ahead and type into the Q&A box things you want to know, have them resolved, and I'll start answering these. All right, number one, will there be the same amount of questions per section? That remains to be seen. Most likely we'll have, a similar number of questions. Like the first section, most certainly, but I don't know if we're going to go from 20 questions on section 1 to 15 on 2, or if it'll vary number of questions based on the level of difficulty that you're bracketed in. I'm not sure about that. So that's something we're going to know a lot more of once they give us practice tests. And that'll probably be, by the fall. By November, we'll start going in there and, testing out, finding out. And it may be consistent all the way through. They both have the same number, like 20 and 15 or 20 and 20, whatever it is. But we're going to find that out in a couple of months. All right. Is the ACT currently developing a similar digital test? Now, they've been administering a computer-based test internationally for the last 3 years. No one in Canada, no one in France and Ethiopia has been taking a paper-based ACT. They've all been digital. In terms of the adaptive engine, we believe they have that. They announced they were going to make it adaptive in 2018. And the former CEO, Martin Rorta, he said every single test in our suite of tests is going to be adaptive, period, paragraph, that it's simply the way of the future. So the assumption is they actually have been working on this for several years, but now will this force the hand of the current CEO? Will God would go and release a test that's adaptive, even though that's been part of their plan all along? Will this fast track that? And the answer is more than likely yes. So we'll know more later on. They'll announce something within the year or the summer. We'll find out. And again, the name adaptive, that's simply the matter of they're going to give you the same baseline, and your performance will determine the next one. So for math, if I do well, I'm going to get a harder math section. If I don't do well, I'll get an easier math section. But I'm going to have scoring brackets I can't move beyond, essentially. I can't drop below a 500 in this score, and I can't go over a 600 in this one. Things like that. And so that's how it's adaptive. So your performance on the first one determines questions you get later. Sorry, I arrived late. In terms of the cost, do we expect changes in the pricing? We don't know yet about the pricing. And honestly, when it comes to this, they're going to have to figure out how to pay for it. If they're going to be buying Chromebooks for kids or tablets, that'll be a cost. But in terms of the administration, it actually gets easier. You're not shipping paper. You're not running Scantrons or fixing Scantron machines. You're not, the workload, the logistics actually get simpler because it's digital. And so their actual total cost may decrease. So I'm not sure how they're going to figure out pricing on this one just yet. Now, the fall PSAT 2023, will that be used as the National Merit Qualifying Test? Yes, it will. So that PSAT will be National Merit, and that's coming for current freshmen. It's going to be when you're going to be when you're juniors. Practice material is going to be released. We know they're going to be releasing practice on the Khan Academy site. They announced they're going to have full tests by the fall, and to get those kids internationally ready. So we're going to see. I'm expecting that by November, potentially October, we're going to be seeing materials in full test to play with. All right, doesn't an adaptive test hurt a kid with anxiety? Now, that is more of an issue with a GMAT because the GMAT is item adaptive, and the first few items count a lot more. But section adaptive, you have the full half an hour. I mean, it's the same thing like on the ACT. That's all you have is half an hour. So if you have some nerves on the front end, then that could, you have half an hour to get settled in and calm down if you get anxious. But otherwise, I mean, if you don't do well in a whole section, that's going to affect your performance on any test, paper or otherwise. So I think this really is less of an issue with anxiety than it would be if they did it on the GMAT model, where the first questions matter a lot, which isn't the case here. They all count the same if they're using the model of the GRE. Thanks so much. No problem, Sonia. Okay, test optional. This doesn't affect test optional. Test optional admissions are doing what they're doing in schools, are really not going to worry so much about the format because they care about the score. And these new tests, a 650 means the same thing. If I get, a 720, same percentile, same thing, they're going to equate the scores. And colleges, all they're going to know is I have 720 in 2023, then a 720 now. But the format, they're not going to be that worried about the format. Schools have been going test optional for a variety of reasons to increase their application numbers. It also gives them cover to admit anybody they want. If they end up getting rid of affirmative action, then test optional is the answer to that. They can still admit a class they want, and test scores become less of an issue politically and optically. But schools who want to go optional, they're going for their own reasons, but this won't affect that, in my perspective. And the majority, there are 1,817 or so colleges in the US who are test optional, and test optional is going to remain the law of the land. You're going to have some schools, like all the state schools in Florida and Georgia, are test required. There's a very good chance we'll see some of the states in the South, Tennessee, the Carolinas, Alabama, Texas, going back to testing required. But we'll learn over years. But the majority of schools are going to be optional, and a handful are going to be test blind, like the California system is blind, Worcester Poly, a few other small schools, Catholic. But otherwise, test scores, if you have a good test score, is going to be an advantage. How much of an advantage depends upon the admissions office in terms of their relative weighting. But a good test score, if I have good grades and rigor and I have a strong, I get a 1550, well, that's part of the conversation about my application. All right, and in terms of scoring, the scores don't change. 800 verbal, 800 math, no different than it is today. The one, they are combining the writing and the reading into just verbal again. That's the way it used to be. That's the way it is on the GMAT and on the GRE. So in terms of Applerouth, how's it going to work? Well, tutoring, and I've been tutoring kids for digital tests. I was tutoring kids for the GRE and GMAT in 304, 07. You prep them with paper for content review, and then you're going to prep them with digital testing for practice tests. And Applerouth, we already have developed several practice tests for the ACT. They're not adaptive, but we are already working now. We're going to be hiring people, psychometricians, test writers. We're going to make thousands and thousands of problems, and we're going to have our own Applerouth generated tests that are adaptive to SAT. We're going to spend whatever it is, $250,000, $500,000, whatever the money is, we're throwing it in, and we're going to have full tests for our students, and so that'll be, we're going to make them over time, but we'll definitely have them for domestic kids. And so the platform, and here's the thing, preparation is not that different, because the content, apart from the shorter passages, the content is the same. Reading comp is reading comp, grammar is grammar, Algebra 2, the content's not changing. And actually it's going to be going easier, going from a large passage to a short paragraph. So if you're prepping for the current SAT, you are by definition prepping for the upcoming digital SAT. It's simply going to be learning familiarity with going back and forth and flagging and the timing of it. But the content is identical. So it really is not a big change. And again, I've worked with students forever, 20 years on this content, and kids going to a screen, getting kids ready for the GMAT or the TOEFL or the LSAT, kids get it. I mean, they're digital natives. The screens are familiar. So it's really going to be a pretty easy transition. I've seen it for over decades, getting kids ready for the GRE and the GMAT and so forth. And the total time they've announced near around 2 hours. We don't know, 2:05, 2:10, but it's going to be roughly an hour shorter, which is amazing for kids. Given the new streamlined testing process, will it affect test optional? And I really don't believe they're going to care about that. They're going optional for other reasons. But if they think it might get them more diversity or more kids might apply, or they become more selective, or it drops their average test score because the average test score increases because you have low scoring kids not submitting scores. There are a lot of reasons to go test optional, but it doesn't really involve the format of the test. That's not going to change things. Okay, in terms of adaptive, can you bump up, you take the STS second digital time, can you keep bumping up levels? So every time, so I take it, let's say in January, I go in there in my school office in January, and I take the first section, I do okay, and then I get a middle section. So I end up scoring a 620. Okay, I go in there in February, in April, take it again, and I have a really strong first performance. I get 19 of 20 right. Then they're going to throw me into the hardest bracket, and I end up getting a 740, whatever it is. So your previous performance is not going to affect you. Every test, it's a reset when you go in there and take it fresh each time. Okay. Any changes to the idea of super scoring? You know what? I don't think philosophically it should matter, because they're saying they're saying the equating process is such that if I get a 730 on a current paper math SAT, it should be the same as on digital. So will they mix and match? They probably will. I think that there's a very good chance they're going to take a 740, and I'm not certain about this, and we'll have to wait and see. But to me, logically, it makes sense. They're on the same scale, the same percentile ranks. So if I get a 730 on math in March 2024, and I had a 710 on verbal in 23 in December, they should match those up and use those. But they're gonna, and different schools may have different policies. But ultimately, they're all going to be embracing this, the same as they've all embraced the digital GMAT and the digital MCAT and the digital TOEFL. Schools thoroughly embrace digital tests. And so that really isn't an issue for them. And I think they understand that this is where testing is going, and it needs to for a lot of reasons. How do you envision students will be able to prep for the ST test with a likely limited pipeline coming from the Khan Academy? Current students taking ST have had to deal with a total of 10 tests for the last 6 years or so. And you're going to have, like when I used to prep kids for the GMAT, and what I did, I used the Power Prep. They only give you a couple of free tests. And then I went to a company like Manhattan GMAT, and I gave them $100, and we had 5 tests, and I used their tests. So they spent the money, and they developed the engine. They worked with econometricians, and they spent, so Applerouth, we're going to be spending $1 million, whatever it is, to build these tests out. And then we may actually sell these publicly. So you have the Khan Academy tests. And then if you want to buy a suite of 4 other tests, you come to Applerouth, or you come to another company. It's going to be, you're not going to have mom and pops developing their own tests. You have to have a certain amount of resources and, your programming strength to do this. But we have a team of many, many people. And so that's how it's going to happen. Either you buy it from a company like an Applerouth or a Manhattan, or I'm certain that Kaplan, Princeton Review, Gruber's, McGraw-Hill, the big companies are going to make the investment and throw in the money and generate these. And so you'll be able to buy access. You have a login for X number of months or for a year, and you can go in there and keep taking these tests. So that's how it'll work out. You have Khan Academy, and then you're going to have the big players, but we definitely will be among the big players. Are they going to expect the tests? Well, schools are test optional. You can submit scores or not, but we've seen again and again that, having strong test scores, that creates a benefit when you're applying to schools. So do colleges state, do they prefer the SAT over the ACT? No, they don't. And we don't believe there'll be any preference because one is digital, one's not. That's really not going to be a factor in my perspective. I'm a freshman. Should I do the old format or the new one? I'm also going for merit scholarships. Well, when you are going for merit scholarships, when you're a junior, that's going to be October 2023, and that's going to be digital. So I would say if you're shooting for national merit, then you should be prepping on these tests, and they're going to become available in November, December of 2022. So you're going to have plenty of time. You'll have a year to practice on them, getting ready for national merit. And you might as well, if you want to go and take a paper one, you can too. If you're prepping for national merit, that's going to be in October, and you could then go ahead and take the November or December test and do it on paper, and then go in there and take the digital one in March. And I really feel like we're going to see a lot of kids doing that. And that tends to always happen when there's big changes. When the GRE changed in 2011, I was there, and I had students taking the old one and the new one. There was a lot more double taking as kids hedged their bets back in 2011. Okay, very good. So do you think that students will be able to order their SATs back 3 times a year where they can now? The answer is no. They've announced that they're not doing that. And the same thing like with the GMAT and the GRE, they also don't release tests because they're never again going to be fixed test forms. I think the solution, their compromise will be we're going to release a certain number of test practice items, but the idea of a full test, they're not going to be releasing full tests, and not your test, not the one they gave. It could be they release a test form of 20 questions in this section, 19 in the other, but it's they're going to be maybe retiring items, but not retiring full tests. Because again, two students, like this section 2 is contingent upon performance on text on the first section. It's Bayesian probability. How you do here will determine how you do over here. And so they could give you a baseline in the 3 possible sections. That's one way to do it, but as a way of practicing. But it's really going to depend upon performance. So all right, but yeah, the current test release goes away forever. That's not going to be a thing in the future. They'll have to figure out some compromise to make sure kids have access to actual questions. Would you imagine a large, and I think honestly, given Khan Academy and that they're using actual materials, that probably solves for the truth in testing stuff out of New York, which is why they're doing this. But we'll find out. Would you imagine a large swing towards the SAT if folks perceive it as being easier due to the shorter reading comp questions and overall shorter? It could definitely happen. Currently it's already easier for pacing, and now it's going to be even less focus on speed and less focus on mental endurance. Do I think that might drive some kids right into their arms? Yes, I believe that will. We don't know what extent, and that's not really why they're doing it. It's more for test security and other reasons. And for the real play they want to do is like already they have 1 million kids taking this during the school day. And honestly, that number is going to go up by quite a bit. And it could be 1.5 million kids take this during the school day. And it's really being designed to be administered at the school's convenience, not their pleasure. They can do 30 kids here, 80 kids there, 100 kids there, just take up a few periods. So this really makes it easier for testing during the school day. And so we're going to see a lot more of that. So I do think it's a major play in that direction. I think they're going to win some real contracts at the state level and district level and so forth. What's the benefit of making it adaptive by section versus by question? Is it easier for them to design given they don't have a lot more time before it starts? Honestly, no. Like the GMAT and the GRE were both item adaptive as of 1997. The GRE changed. The reason they changed, this is interesting, is that there were kids who were memorizing their way through problem banks, that there were only so many, they didn't have a big enough, robust enough problem bank. And so there were a lot of tutors, many of them over in Asia. There were some companies sending like 100 tutors, and your job is to memorize the pathway through the questions. And so they knew if I got this question right, they're going to either serve me this one or this one. So I would memorize this one. Then if I get this one right, they're memorizing all the pathways through. And so the tutor A, your job is go in there and memorize question 1 through 20. Tutor B, memorize question, and then they come back and then dump it all down. And they were able to recreate the pathways. And that was really troubling. And then after those scandals, the GRE said, you know what, we're going to dump that whole model, and we're going to just, make a lot of sections and make it section adaptive. And we're going to have, so many sections you can't memorize them. And so the GRE has been doing the same thing for over 10 years. The GMAT, their answer is we're just going to have item adaptive. And the way they answer it is they just generate thousands and thousands and thousands of problems. So if you have a big enough problem bank, and so if I get this one right, I might get one of these 15 questions. And these 15, I might get one of these 20. So it just goes out and out and out, and you can't memorize it all. And with machine learning, again, they have technology now. I learned this from the ACT like years ago, that they were buying up companies doing artificial intelligence, machine learning, where I'm going to plug in 200 math problems from the ACT, and the machine reads its these patterns and generates out 10,000 other ones. And that's pretty incredible. Additionally, they're able to generate natural language and text, and then you can make questions from those. So they're going to have such enormous problem banks that testing is going to be all but impossible. But that cheating will be all but impossible. So I think in terms of part of their release, the press release, what they said, the College Board said that when you're item adaptive, the first 5 items matter a lot and there's more pressure. And so they said they're doing it for the sake of lowering the level of anxiety. They don't want to put huge pressure on these first few questions. They're also using ETS to develop, and ETS, works with the GRE. And so it could be they're going to piggyback off them in terms of for test development and norming and so forth. But they really could have gone either way. And I personally like item adaptive, but section adaptive is also okay. And they said you can go back and forth. You can change your mind. You have time. It's not, because the problem with item adaptive, once you go forward, you can't ever go back. And so this way kids can go back if they're not sure, they want more time. So there are a few reasons, but they definitely could have gone either way. And both are totally reliable and valid means of assessment. So, all right. We have time for, it's 8:50. My Apple Watch is saying stand. I'm saying not right now. You are my overlord, you little watch. What else? We have time for more questions. As you receive more difficult questions, do you need more time to solve them? Is that fair? And that's something I'm not sure about. So if I'm getting the easy section or the middle or the hard section, are they going to modify the number of items? Is that going to be something where they're going to equate? So will the easy section have 20 easy questions, but the hard section, they'll have 15? That remains to be seen. We're going to learn that. Or they're going to give kids harder questions, but they're going to equate it differently. That even if, it could be that if you get 15 right of the 20, that still could equate to a 790, whereas, based on difficulty level or so forth. But if I only have the same number right on the easy questions, I'm not going to get more than 500. So they're going to equate it. They're going to use, their stats, and they're going to, hire their experts, their PhD folks, and they're going to write these tests. But it'll be fair, but I don't know the nuances of how they're going to do this. We'll know a lot more in about 7-8 months. Did you say ETS is developing it, or ATS? So ETS, the Ed Testing Service, has worked with the College Board for decades and decades and decades, and for test creation and norming. And ETS also does the GRE. So the Ed Testing Service, with all of their psychometricians and writers and academics, they help with test creation. ATS, Applerouth is going to be developing our own, the same as we've already developed several digital ACTs, which we use with our kids prepping overseas for practice. Beyond Khan Academy, we have our materials. Applerouth is also going to be developing, we're talking about it already, but looking at new hires, going back to schools and finding stat professors. We're going to be making our own test too. And so we already have thousands of items in our problem banks, but we're going to probably make tens of thousands of items in our problem banks and develop an engine to do this. And so we're going to be doing this. We're going to release them closer to when this is relevant for the current freshmen. But for the short term, it's going to be working with them and also scrutinizing what they're going to release to us in November and really understanding the algorithm, trying to tease out how they achieve certain scores. I'm sure we'll run those tests 500 times with different combinations of answers and seeing how they kick out now the raw scores. So are students allowed to see the test by request? No. Period, paragraph. That isn't a thing anymore. All right. Are there different testing strategies that you would employ if this kind of adaptive versus the current? Well, part of it is, every question on the first section, we're assuming if they're using the model of the GRE counts the same. So you don't want to blow through, and be in a hurry to get to certain questions. Everything counts once. And so if there are 20 points, you get a raw score of 15 or a raw score of 10 or whatever it is. So making sure you're focused, you aren't, going too quickly, watching your timing. But it's really, the way testing has been moving, there really aren't that many tricks anymore. It's the question is, do you know the content? And Applerouth for years, we've been teaching content. Do you know algebra? Do you know read comprehension? Do you know, and we're teaching academic skills taught in high school. So there may be a few things to help you with, but ultimately we teach content. All right, very informative. My pleasure. My pleasure. Do you think there will be any questions that are not counting towards your score experimental questions? So typically, they don't ever pre-test questions with intermixed with official questions, because they could throw a bad item and suddenly a student getting everything right hits an item that there really is no good answer. And then suddenly you're like, that kid might spend 3 minutes stuck on a question, which shouldn't be there. And that's the reason why when it comes to the GRE or other tests, they have separate experimental sections. And currently with the SAT and ACT, you have your fixed sections, your 4 sections. And at the end, they have experimental sections. So I'd be floored because part of it, the reason they do pre-testing is to figure out, A, is it a good question? 2, how hard is the question in terms of, is it a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? 3, is it a bias question? Is there any bias by gender, by demographic group, by ethnicity, by region? Can everyone read the question the same and the same interpretation? So they typically are not going to be testing questions interlaced with official counting questions. That's pretty cruel, and that's really not done. That's not isn't the norm in testing. There could be a separate section, or they could just pay kids, and they were in Georgia. They came here and they were giving kids $100, a gift card, to come and pre-test items and questions. And so that could be a model they use as well. How quickly are the results expected to be reported out? The results are expected to be given out in days, not weeks. So it could be 3 days. And currently with the GRE and the GMAT, you take it, you press submit, there's your score. Hey mom, I got a 750, bam. And so you go home and there's no waiting for the email from the College Board. But now they still want some more time to look for anomalies and so forth. And so expect you'll have them in a few days, which is really cool. I think it's, for so many reasons, this is just better for students. I'm a huge fan of this, and I've been talking about this for over 10 years, and I'm glad it's finally here. Good for our students and education in general. We have 4 minutes. Any last questions before we call it? Otherwise, we'll just call it a night. All right, y'all. Oh, and there's a question about percentiles, and they're going to be doing, a conversion in terms of the raw score and into the scaled scores, and the scaled scores and the percentiles. They're going to factor in, like the scaled scores have a percentile embedded. It's kind of based on this distribution, the curve they're using, and so they know that a 750 is going to be X percentile, 780. And they do that when they norm the tests on a large sample of students. They determine the the full spectrum. They understood like the midpoints of 540, and then 1 deviation over, we're going to call it, that's a 640. That's the 68th percentile, and then 1 deviation over, that's going to be a 700, and that's the top 2 percentile. That's based on the stats, and they use the probability, kind of histogram kind of things to build that. So it's don't sweat it too much. But I think that's all, y'all. So everyone, have a great night. Thanks for coming out, and look forward to more of these in the future. We'll definitely be doing this again as we learn more. We'll keep you up to speed. All right, y'all, take care. Have a good night.